She stood at the whiteboard in front of the entire board of directors and called my maternity leave a period of organisational chaos. She presented my work as her rescue mission. She smiled like someone who had already won. She had no idea I was sitting 3 rows back with a folder that would end her performance before the coffee got cold. Let me start from the beginning. I came back on a Tuesday in March. That detail matters because Tuesdays in our office have a specific rhythm. The espresso machine in the kitchen starts making that grinding noise around 8:45. Someone always burns toast in the break room microwave before 9. And the open plan floor fills up slowly, the way water rises in a glass. I knew that rhythm. I had built my entire professional life around it for 6 years. My name is Mara. I was, and still am, a project manager at a mid-sized consulting firm that handles digital transformation projects for corporate clients. Before I left for parental leave, I had been running our flagship account, a restructuring project for a logistics company called Vantage Group. The project had been mine from the first pitch meeting. I had written the initial proposal, built the client relationship over 18 months, navigated 3 rounds of scope changes, and personally talked the client back from the edge when their internal politics nearly killed the contract. That project was not just a line on my CV, it was the thing I had built with my hands. When I went on maternity leave, I did everything right. I documented everything. I created handover files so thorough that a stranger could have walked in and understood the project within 2 days. I trained my replacement personally. I answered emails during the first 2 weeks of leave, even though I was not supposed to, because I cared. I cared too much, probably. The replacement was a woman named Lena. Lena had joined the firm about a year before I left. She was ambitious in the way that certain people are ambitious. Not in the sense of working harder or thinking more clearly, but in the sense of being very skilled at positioning herself near visible success and making sure everyone noticed the proximity. She had a talent for arriving at the right moment and a gift for the kind of confident presentation that can make thin content look substantial. She was not incompetent. That would have been easier. She was strategic. I had liked her, actually. Or I had liked the version of her I thought I knew. She had been warm during my handover. She had asked good questions. She had taken notes. She had told me, twice, that she felt honoured to carry my work forward and that she would protect everything I had built. I believed her. I was 8 months pregnant, exhausted, and I believed her. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was assuming that absence would speak for itself, that 6 years of documented results would hold space for me while I was gone, that the work I had done would still be recognisably mine when I returned. I came back on that Tuesday in March, and the first thing I noticed was the coffee mug. I had a specific mug, a dark green ceramic one, with a small chip on the handle that I had never gotten around to throwing away. It had lived on my desk for 3 years. When I walked into the open plan floor, on my first morning back, my desk had been cleared. That was normal. I had expected that. But sitting on the corner of the desk that had been mine, which was now clearly Lena's desk, with her laptop and her notebooks and her printed out calendar, was my green mug, full of her pens. She had not moved to a different desk when she took over my role. She had stayed at mine, and she had kept the mug. I did not say anything about the mug. I picked up my bag, found an empty desk on the far side of the floor, and sat down. I told myself it was just a mug. I was right that it was just a mug. I was wrong that it was only a mug. Our department head, a man named Roland, came over to greet me around 10. He was the kind of manager who communicates primarily through handshakes and vague positivity, and he shook my hand and told me it was great to have me back, and that we would find a good place for me going forward. I noticed the phrasing, find a good place for me going forward. Not, welcome back to your project. Not, Lena has been keeping things warm for you. Find a good place. I asked directly. What's the current status on Vantage Group? He hesitated. Half a second, maybe less. Lena has really stepped up there. It's in good hands. We'll talk about next steps in the coming weeks. I nodded. I said that sounded great. I went back to my desk and I opened my laptop and I started reading. I had kept copies of everything, every file, every version, every email thread. I had my own cloud backup, separate from the company server. This was not paranoia. This was habit. I had been burned before by a server migration that ate 3 months of project notes. And since then, I'd backed up everything personally, methodically, on a schedule. It was a habit so ordinary that I had never thought of it as protection. Now I thought of it as protection. Over the next 2 weeks, I read. I read everything that had happened on Vantage Group during my 8 months away. I read the internal updates Lena had sent to Roland. I read the client-facing reports. I read the meeting notes. I read the version history on every shared document. And I started to understand what had happened. The project I had handed over was at a critical phase. The client had been nervous about a particular module, a logistics routing system overhaul that was technically complex and politically sensitive inside their organization. I had spent months building a framework for that module. I had the client's trust. I had a roadmap. I had contingency plans. All of it was in the handover documents. Lena had used my framework. She had used my roadmap. She had used my contingency plans. She had taken them, removed my name from the file metadata where she could, and presented them as her own strategic thinking. In her internal updates to Roland, she referred to herself as having developed a new approach to the routing module, an approach that had stabilized the project after the disruption of the transition period. The disruption of the transition period. That was me, my pregnancy, my leave, my absence, the disruption. I sat with that for a while. I read the sentence 3 times. Then I made myself a cup of tea, not from the green mug, which was still full of her pens, but from a plain white one I found in the kitchen cabinet, and I went back to reading. There was more. In December, about 5 months into my leave, Lena had presented a project review to Roland and 2 senior directors. I had not been informed of this review. I had not been invited, which was not required while I was on leave, but I had not even been mentioned in the materials. The project was presented as Lena's project. Her initiative, her structure. The client relationship was described as one she had built and nurtured. I had emails from the client contact, a man named Stefan, dated before my leave, in which he specifically said that my approach to the relationship had been the reason Vantage Group had stayed with the firm after the first year. I had those emails. Lena did not know I had them. I also had something else. The original proposal document, with my name in the author metadata, dated 18 months before Lena had even joined the company. The proposal that had won the account in the first place. That was the first layer of the record, the founding documents that proved I had built this from scratch, before Lena existed in the company's story at all. I kept reading. In January, Lena had been recommended for a promotion to senior project manager. The recommendation cited her work on Vantage Group specifically. It cited her ability to step into a high-pressure situation and deliver results, and her strong client relationship skills. The promotion was pending board approval. The board review was scheduled for the quarterly review in April. I looked at the calendar. It was the 3rd week of March. I had approximately 3 weeks. I did not go to Roland, not yet. I did not go to HR, not yet. I did not send Lena an email, or call her into a meeting, or confront her in the kitchen over the mug full of her pens. I did none of those things. I made a folder. Actually, I made several folders. I organized everything chronologically and by category. Original documents, with my authorship metadata, version histories showing my contributions before my leave and the subsequent changes. Client emails, the handover files I had sent Lena, time-stamped, with her confirmation receipt, my own project notes, dated, showing the conceptual framework that had been presented as her innovation. That was the second layer, version histories and time-stamped handover records that showed line by line where her new approach had actually come from. The dates did not lie. The metadata did not lie. I had sent her the framework in July. She had presented it as her own thinking in December. The gap between those 2 dates was the entire shape of what she had done. I also called Stefan. Stefan was the primary contact at Vantage Group. We had worked together closely for almost 2 years. He was a direct man, not given to flattery, which meant that when he said something positive, it landed with weight. I called him on a Wednesday afternoon, framed it as a check-in, a returning project manager wanting to reconnect with the client. He was warm. He was genuinely glad to hear from me. He asked about the baby. I told him. He asked when I was officially back on the project. I paused. I said I was in the process of transitioning back and wanted to make sure I had a clear picture of where things stood. He said, and I am not paraphrasing, that he was relieved I was back. He said the past months had been fine, professionally, but that the energy had changed. He said the person covering for me had done the work, but had not had the same understanding of what Vantage Group actually needed. He said he had been meaning to reach out to Roland to ask about the transition timeline. I thanked him. I asked if he would be willing to put that in writing, just a brief email to me confirming our reconnection and his thoughts on continuity. He said of course. The email arrived the next morning. I added it to the folder. That was the third layer, the client's own voice, unsolicited and direct, confirming that the relationship had been mine and that my absence had been felt. Stefan had no stake in the internal politics of my firm. He just knew what the project had felt like with me and without me. And he had said so plainly, 3 layers, founding documents, version histories, client testimony. I printed the index, labelled the sections, and closed the folder. The quarterly review was on a Thursday in early April. It was held in the large conference room on the 4th floor, the one with the glass wall that looks out onto the atrium, the room that gets used when something is meant to be seen. The board members sat on one side of the long table, department heads and senior staff on the other. I'd been in that room many times. I knew its specific smell, that combination of dry erase markers and recycled air, and the faint trace of whatever someone had eaten for lunch. I arrived early. I found a seat 3 rows back, not at the main table, in the observer section. I had my laptop. I had my printed folder, which I placed face down on the desk in front of me. I had a coffee in a paper cup from the lobby, because the green mug was still full of Lena's pens, and I had decided I did not want it back. Lena arrived 7 minutes later. She was dressed for the occasion. She looked confident in the particular way of someone who has been rehearsing. She set up her laptop at the main table, arranged her notes, and spoke quietly with Roland for a few minutes. At one point, she looked up, scanned the room, and saw me. Her expression did something complicated. It rearranged itself quickly into something that looked like a smile. "Mara," she said, "great that you could join us. Join us, not welcome back, not glad you're here. Join us." As if this were her room and I had been invited. "Of course," I said. I smiled back. I picked up my coffee. The review began. There were 3 agenda items before Vantage Group. I sat through them. I listened. I drank my coffee. I did not look at Lena. When the Vantage Group item came up, Lena stood. She had a presentation. It was polished. She was good at presentations. I will give her that. She had a clear structure, good visuals, confident delivery. She walked the board through the project history, the challenges, the current status, the roadmap to completion, and then she said it. She said that the project had gone through a difficult period during the maternity leave transition, a period of organisational instability that had required significant intervention to stabilise. She used the phrase maternal absence gap. She said she had developed the strategic framework that had brought the project back on track. She said the client relationship had been rebuilt on a new foundation. She presented a slide with her own name on it as lead architect of the current project structure. She called it a rescue. She did not say my name once. One of the board members, a woman named Dr. Henke, asked about the original project proposal and the initial client relationship. Lena said that the project had been inherited in a state that required significant restructuring. She said the original approach had been sound but had needed updating. Dr. Henke nodded and wrote something down. I waited until the presentation ended. I waited through the initial round of questions. I waited until Roland said, "Are there any other questions or comments before we move on?" I raised my hand. Roland looked slightly surprised. "Mara?" "I have a few things I'd like to add," I said. "If the board has a moment." I did not ask Lena's permission. I stood up. I connected my laptop to the secondary display at the side of the room. I opened the folder. "I want to start with the original proposal," I said. "The document that won the Vantage Group account. This is the file with the original authorship metadata visible. My name, the date, 18 months before Lena joined the company. I let that sit for a second. The strategic framework for the routing module overhaul, which was presented today as a new development, appears here in my handover documentation, which I prepared and delivered to Lena in July of last year. This is the version history. You can see my contributions here, here, and here. You can see the dates. You can see the file names. Lena said something. I think she said my name. I kept going. The client relationship that was described as rebuilt is one I established over 18 months. I have emails from Stefan at Vantage Group from that period. I also have an email from him received last week in which he described his relief at my return and his concerns about continuity during my absence. I would like to share that with the board. I shared the screen. I showed the email, Stefan's name, the date, the plain, direct language of a man who had no reason to perform anything. I want to be clear about what I'm not saying, I said. I am not saying that Lena did no work. She maintained the project during my leave. That has value, but the framing presented today, that my absence created organizational chaos, that the project was rescued by her intervention, that the strategic thinking was hers, is not accurate. And I think the board should have accurate information, especially given that a promotion recommendation is on the table. Silence. Not the polite silence of a room waiting for the next speaker. The particular silence of a room recalibrating. Dr. Henke looked at Lena, then at me, then at the screen. She said, "Can you leave these documents with us?" "Already sent to your assistant," I said, "along with a full index." I sat down. I picked up my coffee. It was cold by then, but I drank it anyway. Lena did not collapse dramatically. Real life does not usually work that way. What she did was something quieter, and in its own way, more revealing. She tried to recover. She said that the documents I had shown were the foundation she had built upon. She said that project leadership required more than documentation. It required real-time judgment. She said that anyone who had been absent for 8 months could not fully understand what had happened in that time. Roland said her name, just her name, quietly. She stopped. The board moved on to the next agenda item. Afterward, in the hallway, Lena found me. She was composed mostly. Her voice had that particular tightness of someone managing a great deal of internal pressure through the muscles of their jaw. "That was unnecessary," she said. "The presentation or the correction?" I asked. "You made me look like I was lying." "I showed the board accurate documentation," I said. "What that made you look like is something you'll have to work out for yourself." She said something about how I had been gone, how she had carried the weight, how it was not fair that she had done the work, and I was getting the credit. There was something almost genuine in it, buried under the performance. She had worked hard. She had put in hours. She was not entirely wrong that maintaining someone else's project for 8 months was difficult. But she had also taken credit for things she had not built. She had called my maternity leave a disruption and presented it as justification for erasing me. She had looked at the board and said the word rescue, while my name was nowhere in the room. I did not say any of that to her. There was no version of that conversation that would have been useful. "I'm glad you were here to cover the project," I said. "That was your job. I'm back now. That's mine." I walked away. The following week, Roland called me into his office. He was more careful than usual. He said the board had reviewed the documentation I had provided. He said there would be a reassessment of the Vantage Group project leadership. He said the promotion recommendation for Lena was being put on hold pending a fuller review. I asked what that meant for my role. He said that my position as project lead on Vantage Group was being reinstated, effective immediately. I said thank you. I asked if there was anything else. He said, hesitantly, that he wanted to understand how the documentation situation had developed. He said it in the way that managers say things when they are trying to determine how much they are implicated in a problem. I told him that I had kept thorough records throughout my tenure, which was standard practice for any project manager worth their position. I told him that the discrepancy between the records and the presentation had been significant enough that I felt the board needed the full picture. I told him that I hoped going forward, transitions around parental leave would be handled with clearer documentation protocols to prevent this kind of confusion. I used the word confusion deliberately. I watched him accept it with visible relief. He agreed that better protocols would be a good idea. He suggested I might want to lead the development of those protocols, given my experience. I said I would be happy to. I walked out of his office and back to my desk, the desk that was now mine again. Lena had moved her things to a different space on the floor. The desk was clear, clean, ready. The green mug was still at her station. I did not take it back. I did not want it back. It had been a mug. It had done its job as a symbol, and now it was just a ceramic object with a chipped handle that belonged to whoever wanted it. I had a plain white mug now. It held coffee just as well. In the weeks that followed, I went back to Vantage Group. I called Stefan and told him I was formally back as lead. He said, finally. We scheduled a full project review. When we met, in person, at their offices, he shook my hand and said the project had felt rudderless for months and that he was glad to have continuity restored. I did not tell him the details of what had happened internally. He did not need them. What he needed was competent, consistent leadership, and that was what I gave him. Lena remained at the firm. I want to be honest about that. There was no dramatic firing, no public shaming, no moment where she was escorted out by security while the office watched. The promotion did not go through. She was moved to a smaller account. She kept her job. She was professional toward me in the way that people are professional when they have run out of other options. Some people found that anticlimactic. I did not. I had not wanted her destroyed. I had wanted the record corrected. Those are different things. What I had wanted and what I got was to walk back into the work I had built and have it acknowledged as mine, to stand in front of the board without apologizing for having been a mother, to present documentation and have it speak without me having to perform outrage or grief or desperation. To be precise and prepared and let that be enough. It was enough. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being a mother who is also professionally ambitious in a world that treats those two things as inherently in tension. The assumption that your attention is divided, your commitment suspect, your absence evidence of something. I had felt that assumption in Roland's phrasing on my first day back. Find a good place for you going forward. I had felt it in Lena's presentation, the maternal absence gap. I had felt it in the way the board had nodded along without questioning whether the narrative they were hearing was complete. I had not exploded at any of those moments. I had noted them. I had filed them, metaphorically and literally. I had waited for the room where they could be corrected with evidence rather than emotion, because I knew that emotion would be used against me, and evidence could not be. That is not a lesson I should have needed to learn. It is a lesson the situation taught me anyway, and I am not going to pretend I'm grateful for the teaching. What I am is clear. I am clear about what I built and what I own. I am clear about what I will document and what I will protect. I am clear that my maternity leave was not a gap or a disruption or a period of organizational chaos. It was 8 months in which I had a child, and then I came back, and the work was still mine because I had built it and I had the records to prove it. I am clear that I will not apologize for either of those things. A few months after the quarterly review, I was leading the final phase of the Vantage Group project. We were in the last stretch before delivery. The routing module, the one that had been the source of so much internal anxiety, was working. Stefan sent me a message on a Friday afternoon that said simply, "This is exactly what we needed. Thank you for seeing it through." I read that message sitting at my desk, in the late afternoon light that comes in low through the west-facing windows of the open-plan floor. The kind of light that turns everything slightly amber and makes the whole room feel like it is pausing for a moment. I thought about the Tuesday in March when I had walked back in and found my desk occupied and my mug full of someone else's pens. I thought about the folder I had built, file by file, over 3 weeks of careful, quiet reading. I thought about the conference room on the 4th floor and the silence after I had shared my screen. I thought about Dr. Henke's expression as she looked from Lena to me, to the dates on the screen, and the way that silence had felt like a door closing on a story someone else had been trying to write about me. I thought about my daughter, who was 8 months old when I came back, and who is now almost a year and a half, and who had recently discovered that she could climb the back of the couch and was extremely proud of this. I thought, I did not let them take this from me, and I did not have to become someone else to keep it. That was the thing I had been most afraid of, actually. Not losing the project. Not the promotion, that had been dangled in front of Lena and might once have been dangled in front of me. Not even the professional reputation. I had been afraid that to fight back I would have to perform something. Perform anger or victimhood or relentless hustle or some version of myself that had no room in it. For a child and a chipped green mug and the particular rhythm of a Tuesday morning, I had not had to perform anything. I had shown up with a folder and told the truth. The new protocols for parental leave transitions went into effect in June. I wrote them. They included mandatory documentation standards, clear project ownership language, and a formal reintegration process for returning parents. Roland signed off on them. HR distributed them. They were not revolutionary. They were just clear. Clarity, I have found, is its own form of power. Lena and I have not had a real conversation since the hallway outside the conference room. We exist in the same professional space with the careful distance of people who have chosen not to make their history into an ongoing event. I do not think about her much. When I do not feel the sharp thing I felt in March. I feel something flatter and more final, the way you feel about a decision you made correctly under pressure. Not triumphant, just settled. The green mug, as far as I know, is still at her station. I have walked past it occasionally. It does not bother me. It is a chipped ceramic mug. It was never the point. The point was the work. The point was the record. The point was walking back into a room where someone had tried to write me out of my own story and saying calmly with documentation, that is not what happened. Here is what happened. I built something. I left to have a child. I came back. The work was still mine. That is the whole story. Everything else was just the proof.